Representatives of South Korea's defense, unification, and foreign ministries all held press conference yesterday after an exchange of fire between the two Koreas on Monday. Lignet's Lisa Ruth joins us in studio to talk about the North Korean leader, Kim Jong-un, his political posturing, and whether the latest exchange of fire between the two Koreas is more than business as usual.
And after the president's victory lap, the latest Obamacare approval ratings are out, but they're telling different stories. Newsmax TV's Ed Berliner is here with us to weed out fact from fiction and lend some extra credibility to the polls that represent true public opinion.
And time is running out for banking organizations to comply with the Volcker rule, but without clear guidelines, the industry is left asking exactly what it needs to comply with. Dick Beauvais, equity research analyst for Rafferty Capital Markets, will be here to help explain the rules guidelines or the lack thereof. America's Forum continues right now. It's our third and final hour of America's Forum for this Wednesday. I'm J.D. Hayworth.
Wow, third hour already, J.D. Great to have everybody here with us. We'll turn our attention right now to the Korea. South Korea says it intercepted a drone from North Korea. Officials say the unmanned aircraft crashed on a frontline South Korean island that is located very close to where this was taking place right here. This is video of a recent military drill conducted with the United States and South Korea. While this was happening, the North fired rockets that landed in South Korean waters. This is all part of the flare-up between the North and the South. What's really going on here? Is North Korea the latest geopolitical flashpoint, or is this just another case of the dear leader, Kim Jong-un, being a brat? Don't forget, this all comes after he supposedly commanded that every man, I should say, in his country get the same haircut as him. Joining us right now to discuss this is former C.I.A. officer Lisa Ruth. And Lisa, it's easy for us here in the United States to look at Kim Jong-un, especially when Dennis Rodman goes over there, and kind of laugh this off as this guy being a maniacal nutcase here. But is there real concerns about North Korea here being a legitimate threat on a global scale?
Sure, North Korea is a real threat. Let's start with, here's a nuclear power that doesn't like us. You know, that in itself is a difficult situation. When we look at something like what happened between the Koreas, it is very tempting to say it's business as usual. It is, in that it's happened before, it's going to happen again, but that doesn't mean it's okay, and it doesn't mean that it's contained necessarily. And, you know, it would be very, very easy for this to turn into a misstep, perhaps, and to have it expand or explode.
Kim Jong-un is a situation where, and John referenced this earlier, in the Western world, we look at him as, to put it diplomatically, a curiosity. Mm-hmm. To put it more realistically, we think of him as a maniacal nut. But if he is this oppressive with the men of his nation, allegedly saying you're going to get your hair cut the way I have it, and the repressive regime there, given his newness on the job, but his ruthlessness in terms of eliminating family members, in terms of further, this goes beyond just Stalinist tactics here. The North Koreans have developed a style all their own. What's to keep this guy from deciding, with his alliance with Iran, to go ahead and lob a nuclear missile somewhere?
Well, and the first point is you're absolutely right. This guy is something we really don't even know what to deal with. And part of it is we don't have a lot of sense of what he's doing. It's very hard to know. But your question is, I think he's crazy like a fox more than crazy like a lunatic. He's very calculating. He's moving very carefully. What's keeping him from doing it? Kim wants to stay in power. His biggest thing is Kim. He's also not stupid, I don't believe. He knows very well if he was to lob a nuclear weapon, it wouldn't be like Crimea. If he even really crossed into South Korea, there would be huge reaction from the international community. he would lose. He would be out of power, and that's something he's not willing to risk.
And even right now, Lisa, the relationship between North Korea and China is severely strained. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct, and certainly made worse in January when Kim, what you were alluding to earlier, when he decided to, well, not decided to, he executed his uncle, who was the linchpin between China and North Korea, really the liaison between the two. And he took that action without any talk to Beijing. Beijing used to at least have leverage there. We're not sure now how much he listens to anybody.
Lisa, I want to go back to the point you made earlier about this leader being crazy like a fox. We've seen with the succession of leaders in this one family in North Korea a recurring theme. It first appeared about the time I was elected to Congress, where there were efforts made by the Clinton administration then with the State Department actually sending a nuclear reactor to the outlaw nation of North Korea. And we heard at that time, oh, no, this has nothing to do with giving them power. Why, they can't use this reactor for nuclear weapons. Well, somehow the North Koreans got their hands on those weapons. Then you have the situation with the continued famine, or perhaps the deliberate starvation of the people of North Korea. And whomever is in charge in North Korea starts to throw an international temper tantrum. And then the international community, including the United States, tries to pacify this outlaw nation. Is this a repetition of what we've seen now for the better part of 2 decades?
Unfortunately, I think it probably is. And you talk about this roller coaster here that we've got. This, you know, they get, whether it's Kim or his father, they get angry and they launch a missile or do a missile test. Or Kim, remember, did a nuclear test last year. Keep that in mind. And then the United States, though, and allies around the world, even South Korea, we might use our own bellicose rhetoric, but really when it comes down to it, not a lot of reaction here. And I think part of it may be we're worried. We really don't know what they're going to do.
Well, to that point, I think back to July 4th, 2006, when Kim's dad was in charge, and there are missiles shot at American interests and toward the Japanese, and our administration stays silent.
Absolutely, and I still, that was something that was very controversial, as you probably know, within the intelligence community and within a lot of other sectors. If you look now in the region we've talked about, I think part of Japan, as we know, is looking to build up their defense forces. I think part of that may be knowing if North Korea was to do something, or China was to do something, Japan's on its own. With its self-defense forces now, can't operate outside its borders, looking to protect itself perhaps a little bit better.
And that's interesting as we talk about these tensions in the South China Sea mounting over who can find minerals and other things elsewhere. Lisa, we've also heard it discussed by some experts that North Korea is the model for Iran. They want to obtain a nuclear weapon or nuclear status so they can basically be untouchable and have that nuclear trump card. Is that a fair assessment?
Oh boy, certainly Iran, we know, let me backtrack a little bit. We know North Korea does work with Iran and is willing to share proliferation technology. Does Iran want to be North Korea? I think
not in the way the culture is, but the fact that they have that
Sure.
political trump card to play, that if you push us too far, the button's right here.
And I think for any state, that's a great position to be in, isn't it? And the same thing, you and I, John, have talked before about leverage. North Korea, the U.S., what else can we do to North Korea? There's not a lot we can do. Iran, who's really got some sanctions problems right now, it would be nice to be in a situation where there was nothing the U.S. could do to them.
What is North Korea willing to share? We know the Iranians have done a lot of work on their own. When push comes to shove, would as maniacal a leader as the North Korean leader freely share nuclear technology with the Iranians?
Absolutely. In terms of threat, going back to the original question, one of the biggest threats of North Korea that really the United States, the world as a whole, has not focused on, and Lignet's colleague Mark Groombridge has really highlighted this, is the proliferation threat. North Korea not only is willing to share with Iran. If you look at Syria, when the Israelis blew up the reactor there, that was from North Korea. North Korea absolutely works with rogue states. And yes, they would be willing to share with Iran. I don't think there's any question. And that's an area in terms of where we should be looking to shut down. North Korea's proliferation threat is much larger than we're paying attention to.
This is a Lisa, you always bring us sweetness and love. Well, George Washington gave us the admonition, we must see the world as it is, not merely as we wish it to be. And you're pointing out a serious problem with North Korea, its inclinations and its entire attitude, not only to its own people, but to the nations of the world.
And you mentioned, Lisa, that it's important, you know, Mark is so on top of this, and he has an intimate knowledge of the area, and you can always find his stuff on Lignet. And we'll have you and Mark back at a future date to continue to talk about this, because we know Kim Jong-un is not going away.
No, he'll give us plenty to talk about.
All
Thank
right,
you.
Thanks for being here, Lisa. When we return, just how accurate are the polls? New information about Obamacare and what the American people think. But if you look at the polls, they're all over the place. We'll try to break them down. Ed Berliner will be back with us right after this.